I was thinking about this yesterday as I was rehearsing in my mind the different events of this Passover week. From the Monday, Thursday Passover meal to Good Friday when he was nailed to the cross, to that Saturday when it seems like he went to very unusual places to preach to the dead, to that Sunday morning when he came out of the grave. And then I started thinking about the post-resurrection and how he's back in the garden again. And there are people there that don't recognize him. They've come to that garden because that garden they see as a cemetery. It's no longer a graveyard. Resurrection power has just changed the whole nature of that garden. But these ladies come and they're there to visit the dead. He said, "Why are you looking for me here? It's a graveyard. Why do you come to seek me as a dead man?" I remember another time he said, "Why are you looking for the living among the dead?" What a prophetic statement. Why are you looking for life if you're hanging out where there's only death? We get to choose if we're going to live our life in a graveyard. If we're going to position our life in the past, in the heartache, in the hurts, in the sorrows, in the rejections, in the many, many excuses we have to be sad in life. We get to position ourselves to either live in the graveyard or the garden of God where we come alive. Stop choosing the graveyard. Choose to know him in the power of his resurrection. Yesterday I was running a race and I was almost in vision mode the whole time. God always uses things like that in my life, and I feel like I'm physically there, but there's something else happening sometimes. And you know how you're driving down the road sometimes and all of a sudden you realize you wasn't paying any attention to the last 20 miles and you don't know how you got there. You don't know if you ran red lights or what you did. Y'all know what I'm talking about. That happens to me in races sometimes. When you're on the road, that's not a tricky thing, but when you're running trail races, you wonder how you're still upright and you're not on the ground bleeding. But the whole time I got there was a reason for me to be there yesterday, because it was a different environment for me to be in. Daniel's got me into trail racing now, and I want to transition completely from road racing to trail racing. But Daniel, I have been really reminded it's two completely different worlds. And there's a few guys like you that do both, and most of the people do not. They're either trail runners or they're road runners. And when I go to all these road races and stuff, I know a lot of people there, or at least they look familiar. I get used to some of these same faces no matter where I go. And then you go to a big trail race that clearly is a trail race, and it's like you don't know anybody there because those people are never at the road races, and vice versa. But the thing that began to jump out at me yesterday, because I knew it was going to be a challenge. And someone said, "Why are you doing that to yourself?" It's like, I just want to see if I can do it without being carried out on a stretcher. And there was one guy I thought was going to have to because he face planted in front of me in the rocks. And he jumped up and you know what he said. "I'm okay." Trail runners seem to be a lot of like hippies or something. Daniel, they're really into, nature, and they're like really happy. It could have been because of their medication. I don't know. A lot of the hippies seem to have glaucoma. Everybody was so happy. They really were. I was the only unhappy person there. And I kind of knew what I was getting into, but I didn't. It wasn't as bad as a Spartan trail race, Daniel. Nothing like that. But the next worst thing, Mill Mountain Mayhem. How many knows where Mill Mountain is in Roanoke? The big stars at the top. So it's 800 feet up the mountain. And I thought, I can do 800 feet up that mountain. So when we got there, they said, well, we've changed the race this year, and we've changed some of the trails. And I don't know how it was before. You've ran it before, so I don't know how it is. So we ran up the mountain, and thank God we got to run down the mountain then. And then we ran along the base of the mountain, and then we ran back up the mountain. I was not psychologically prepared for that. I thought it was an up and a down. And when I was coming down, I thought, oh my gosh, I've got like 4 miles of just downhill now, man. I'm in cruise mode. And I was for about 1.5 miles. And then it's like, what's happening? Trails were steep, places you had to, unless you were the elite runners, you had to walk because it was so steep and just really, really rocky. You can never get a rhythm. You know, you're like this, and you know, you're bouncing around between rocks and roots, and you're staring at the ground constantly, hoping a tree branch doesn't catch you across the head. It's a blast, man. So I was in the 4th heat that started out, but I caught some people in those earlier heats. We won't talk about how some of the heats behind me caught me. And I started going by these people on these trails. You're squeezing by them and stuff. And every time I'd go by someone, they'd go, good job, man. You're doing awesome. Keep going. And I'm turning around, giving them dirty looks. It's like, you don't know me. You don't need to be talking to me. But the Lord began to speak to me. He's just saying, son, look at this environment. It's strenuous. It's adversarial to your body. My insides, it was like a milkshake when I finished everything. The downhills were worse than the uphills. It was so bouncy, and you're trying to pump the brakes because if you get going too fast, you know you're going to die on the rocks. And it was a challenge. Like life. And as cliche as it might come off, the Lord uses the cliche because that's the only thing we seemingly see sometimes. He said, son, this is life. Isn't it a challenge? He said, but don't just look at the joy of the people around you in this environment. Look at your own joy in this. And I was filled with joy. Adrenaline was flowing. Daniel, thank you for introducing me to trails. I am in all of my glory when I'm running on a trail, and I'm in nothing but pain when I'm running on roads. Nature, there's the environment is different. It's like comparing 2 gardens, one in Eden and one that's called a graveyard. Lord was showing me, see, son, you're proving today you can be in a challenging environment in life and be alive. Well, it's a picture of our everyday life. Challenging, filled with adversity, filled with enemies and giants and storms and wilderness experiences and blown up expectations and people that break your heart and situations that we can't control that has us in turmoil. And now we have to decide, those of us who believe that the Bible is true, do we really believe it's true? That we can know Him in the power of His resurrection and right here, right now, be filled with invigorating life, enthusiastic days, anticipation and expectation, can't wait to get out of bed, instead of struggling to get out of bed. That's where the rubber meets the road.